In the Central African Republic, hundreds of people, mostly women, are convicted of witchcraft every year. In Indonesia in 1998, during a period of political and economic collapse, angry mobs hunted down between 150 and 300 people accused of being sorcerers, people believed to be using dark magic against their own community. And in India between 2000 and 2012, 2,100 suspected witches were taken out. So I thought it would be dope to do up a super deep dive, not just into witchcraft as an idea, but witchcraft as a lifestyle, a weapon, a scapegoat. We're gonna peel back the layers of the superstitions, long-held traditional beliefs, magic, hysteria across cultures and centuries. We're gonna go around the world and see how different countries define witchcraft. Thank you guys for being here with me, man. My name is Maya. I make videos about things I find interesting. Sometimes it's movies, TV shows, reactions, and sometimes it's witchcraft. Please like and subscribe so we can keep the dream alive. All right, let's talk about witches. All right, so when you hear the word witch, what comes to mind? I think in the West, it's the cliched Halloween depiction of a witch, right? Crooked nose, a wart, a pointy hat, flying through the sky on a broomstick. That image is so baked into pop culture that it feels ancient, traditional, like it's always existed, but it hasn't. In fact, the stereotypical witch on a broom image doesn't show up until the 15th century. One of the earliest known depictions comes from the manuscript written in the 1400s by a French poet named Martin Lafranc. And here's the crazy part, all right? Here's the crazy part. That image wasn't meant to be whimsical or satirical. It was straight up propaganda. The women depicted weren't fairy tale witches. They were based on the Waldensians, a persecuted Christian sect considered heretical. Heretics! Why? Because they had the unmitigated goal to allow women to preach. So right out the gate, there's a lot of negativity associated with the witch imagery. It's not about, ooh, witches, magical, spells, mystery. Nah, it's about marking people as dangerous. It's saying, hey, they don't agree with us. They do things differently. They're evil. They are witches. Matter of fact, the word itself, witchcraft, it doesn't mean, just any kind of magic. It specifically refers to magic believed to cause harm. Not healing, not protection, not spirituality, harm. We're talking illness, misfortune, death, crop failure, bad luck. Across cultures, witchcraft wasn't usually a self-chosen identity. It was an accusation. And that distinction, it's kind of a big deal. It matters because witches were named. They were pointed out, identified by others. And once someone was labeled a witch, the damage was already done. It was hard to shake off them allegations. For most of human history, magic wasn't automatically seen as bad. Now, in ancient societies, the supernatural wasn't niche. It wasn't separate from daily life. If you got sick, that was spiritual. It was a curse. If your crops failed, that was spiritual. The gods did it. If you dreamed something strange, that mattered. That was visions. It was prophecy. Things like that were brought up in normal everyday conversations like the weather. And nearly every culture had folks who were seen as having a deeper connection with the supernatural, the magical, the mystical. We're talking shamans, seers, healers, midwives, herbalists, spirit talkers, people who sat at the intersection of the physical and the invisible. In many indigenous cultures, these people were respected, feared sometimes, of course, but respected. Magic wasn't evil, it was powerful. And power is only scary when someone thinks it's in the wrong hands. Even in ancient Rome and Greece, amidst all them talks of philosophy and morality, belief in harmful magic existed. But it was treated more like a crime than a cosmic evil. Someone poisons you with herbs? It's a crime. Someone uses spells to curse your crops? Crime. It wasn't demonic. There was no deal with the devil involved. It was just a dangerous misuse of powers. The fear of witchcraft wasn't just the fear of the unknown, it was about controlling the unknown. Everything shifts when organized religion enters the picture, of course. See, once there was one God, one truth, one authority, anything supernatural outside that system becomes suspicious. A black and white mindset started getting adopted. We're talking black and white, dark and light, good and evil, heaven and hell. Magic starts being seen as competition. God is supposed to be the one you turn to for your salvation, for your protection, for your healing. Witchcraft, it was bad for business. Church authorities began reframing magical practices as heresy, blasphemy, idolatry, which was then seen as collaboration with evil forces. Bible verses that condemned witchcraft were used to unify Christians against those who were seen as enemies of the one true God. We're talking about verses like Leviticus 19:31. Do not turn to mediums or necromancers. Do not seek them out and so make yourselves unclean by them. I am the Lord your God. Revelations 21:8. But the cowardly, the unbelieving, the vile, the murderers, the sexually immoral, those who practice magic arts, the idolaters, and all liars, their part will be in the fiery lake of burning sulfur. Exodus 22:18. You shall not permit a sorceress to live. And suddenly, witchcraft wasn't just harmful. It wasn't just a misuse of powers. It was treason against God. Because now it's not just the devil. It's not just demons that are responsible for your misfortune. It's those witches, those sorcerers over there in their secret meetings, plotting in their covens and their pacts. You have hidden enemies within your community. What you gonna do about it? And once you introduce that idea that evil looks just like your neighbor, paranoia takes over. Between roughly the 1400s and the 1700s, Europe enters what we now call the witch hunt period. Tens of thousands of people are accused, most of them women, widows, midwives, poor women, women without male protection, women who argued, women who lived alone, women who knew a little too much about herbs. Accusations often followed tragedy. It was a way of trying to make sense of bad things that happened. A child passing away, an unexpected disease, a storm ruining crops. It was like, there's gotta be an explanation. Someone must be responsible. And once someone is accused, the system doubles down and ensures a confession. We're talking torture, sleep deprivation, threats. Confess and your pain stops. Don't confess and it gets worse. Either way, the outcome is the same. This is how entire towns convinced themselves that they were under supernatural attack. Not just across Europe, but also in the United States of America. In 1692, in a small colonial village in Massachusetts, what we now call Danvers, a series of accusations turned a quiet community upside down. What started with a few weird symptoms and frightened kids quickly escalated into mass hysteria, trials, and executions. But it all started on an island country in the Caribbean located in the Atlantic Ocean.
You are not in the UK, you are in Barbados.
Barbados was one of the early British sugar colony hubs in the Caribbean, a place shaped by colonialism, forced migration, plantation life, and the brutal blending of peoples and beliefs. Into this mix came Obeah, a set of spiritual practices carried by enslaved Africans that blended West African cosmology and the Caribbean influences. Obeah wasn't a unified religion with churches or temples. It wasn't organized. It wasn't even public most of the time because the British feared it. But it did survive. It did. And it evolved underground as a deeply respected and feared spiritual craft used for healing, protection, love, or revenge. One of the first people accused during the Salem witch trials, and possibly the very spark that ignited it, was originally from Barbados. Homegirl's name was Tituba, and she lived in Barbados before being brought to Salem by Reverend Samuel Parris. She brought with her stories and spiritual imagery that was unfamiliar to Puritan New England. The good Reverend started bugging out when his 9-year-old daughter Betty, his 11-year-old niece Abigail Williams, and several local girls started acting weird. They'd scream, contort their bodies, cry out. Some of them even claimed invisible forces were attacking them. Local doctors and neighbors couldn't explain it, and witchcraft quickly became the go-to diagnosis, a supernatural explanation for physical symptoms nobody understood. Soon enough, the girls pointed fingers at Tituba. Under intense questioning, she began to describe vivid encounters with the devil and demon familiars. Her testimony sparked the whole thing. Her confession added crazy fuel to the fire. Those on the fence now had proof, an actual confession, that not only were there witches amongst them, but those witches were in league with the devil himself. Once those first accusations happened, the court system jumped in. A special tribunal called the Court of Oya and Termina was set up to handle witchcraft cases. And here's the thing that really makes Salem weird. Most of the evidence was spectral evidence, dreams and visions. Testimony that someone's spirit showed up in visions was considered admissible evidence. Between February 1692 and May 1693, more than 200 people were accused of witchcraft. 30 were convicted. 19 people were taken out, including women and men. At least 5 people kicked the bucket in jail while waiting for trial. These weren't nameless victims. These were fishermen, farmers, mothers, friends, neighbors. Now, there was a lot going on in Salem that made it the perfect breeding ground for the witch hunts. We're talking family feuds, economic tension, religious authority fighting for control, and legal system eager to use supernatural accusations as proof. So maybe what looked like supernatural evil might have been the community panic mixed with some real world tension. The madness didn't go on forever. By late 1692 and early 1693, influential clergymen and political leaders began to question the logic of spectral evidence in court. Governors dissolved the special court, reinstated stricter due process, and eventually pardoned many of those accused. In later years, Massachusetts formally declared the trials unlawful and even reversed some convictions. Crazy to think that at the center of it all was that one woman who started her life in Barbados. And she wasn't the only Bayesian in the mix. Candy, an Afro-Bayesian enslaved woman, was accused of flying as a ghost to torment children. They claimed she was turned into a witch by her owner and then was found not guilty and released. A pretty wild story. Now, back in Barbados itself, witchcraft wasn't as demonized. It was obeah, spiritual craft practiced by enslaved Africans and their descendants. This was healing, protection, divination, remedies for bad luck, ritual cleansing, spiritual intervention. Bayesians would call on obeah men or obeah women, spiritual guides able to read the spirits, help with illness, or settle spiritual imbalance. A respected yet secretive role. Obeah carried both good and feared associations. A healer could fix what doctors couldn't. A curse could be put on a rival. It was whispered about by the Christian majority. Most people didn't talk about it openly though, even though many quietly believed in the spiritual world it referenced. In Barbados, beliefs about spirits also show up in local folklore. We're talking jumbies, wandering spirits or ghosts. Heartman, a supernatural figure believed to harm people. Dilawa, a headless ghost walking the roads at night. Stories like these show how belief in unseen forces was part of the cultural soil, even if it wasn't shouted from the pulpit. Unlike many Caribbean islands where anti-obeah laws persisted into the 20th century, Barbados actually repealed its anti-obeah statute back in the 1840s. Still, because of its history of slavery and the colonial suppression of African belief systems, Obeah and related witchcraft beliefs were driven underground, where they stayed for centuries afterwards. When Europe colonized the world, it didn't just export religion and laws, it also exported the idea of witchcraft. Indigenous spiritual practices were rebranded as dark magic. It's like, yo, we've been doing this forever and now it's witchcraft? Healers became witches. Rituals became curses. Tradition was seen as a lack of education. Beliefs were seen as primitive. And colonial governments used witchcraft accusations to control the masses. The idea stuck. And in many places, it never left. But it wasn't just Christianity that was beefing with witchcraft. In Afghanistan, right now, accusations of witchcraft and sorcery are real charges used by authorities to detain people. Since the Taliban returned to power in 2021, they've revived and expanded the country's Ministry for the Propagation of Virtue and the Prevention of Vice, a government body that enforces strict interpretations of Islamic law. This group doesn't just police dress codes or music. In Afghanistan's legal practice today, sorcery and witchcraft are banned, and authorities claim the power to arrest people for it. According to recent reports, Taliban officials themselves have claimed hundreds of arrests on charges of witchcraft or sorcery, sometimes under the local name Jadoga, which means magician or sorcerer. In recent years, local Afghan news agencies have documented specific cases. In Samangan province, a man was detained on suspicion of practicing illegal magic, accused of using special powers and deceptive promises to solve problems for money. Meanwhile, a woman was reportedly freed from being kept under house arrest in chains by family members who believed she was connected to witchcraft. In Balak and Faria provinces, multiple individuals described by the local Moro police as skilled sorcerers were arrested, along with alleged books said to be used in sorcery. Across Kabul and other regions, reports show that dozens of people have been detained in a single week for charges that range from moral corruption to witchcraft, part of an expanding pattern of enforcing virtue and opposing what authorities deem illicit spiritual behavior. These aren't isolated incidents either. They're part of a broader enforcement trend that blurs the line between religion, superstition, and punishment. And yo, Afghanistan isn't the only place where there are laws in place against witchcraft. In Algeria, belief in witchcraft isn't just fringe. For many people, it's woven into daily life. Some Algerians talk about magic or the evil eye or supernatural interference when things go wrong, from health to relationships or bad luck. People often attribute misfortune, illness, sudden bad luck to black magic or the evil eye. Even in urban areas, people, especially during tough times, might believe someone has cast a spell or used supernatural influence against them. Some families take such beliefs seriously enough that receiving a harmless gift might be viewed with suspicion, like, yo, that's witchcraft, purely based on reputation or fear. There are also cultural figures, Raki, or spiritual healers, who are sought out to remove magic or the evil eye, even by people who also identify as devout Muslims. Unlike people just believing in witchcraft informally, Algeria has recently criminalized witchcraft and sorcery itself. Laws introduced in Law number 24-06 explicitly define sorcery and witchcraft as criminal offenses, strengthening the penalties to deter people who exploit others through these practices. What that means is sorcery and witchcraft are prosecuted as crimes. In Algiers, police arrested a man accused of practicing sorcery for profit, seizing alleged ritual tools and talismans as part of the case, and charging him with fraud, moral harm, and exploitation. The thing is, Algeria has a long history of Sufism, a mystical branch of Islam that blends spirituality with reverence for saints and devotional practices. In some rural or traditional communities, people visit shrines of saints for healing or protection. They use blessings or protective rituals that border on folk belief. These practices reflect a belief in the unseen, jinn, and spiritual worlds. But they often sit in tension with official religious interpretations that prohibit magical, spiritual power. Studies of Algerian communities show visible signs of magical belief, even in the modern day. For example, talismans or objects near cemeteries or tombs that people believe have supernatural power. These aren't just rural fantasies. They are continuing expressions of cultural ways to personify misfortune, jealousy, envy, or spiritual imbalance. Now, here's the thing. While some countries have laws in place to combat witchcraft, there are some cultures that actually embrace their traditional roots. In Haiti, traditional spiritual practice is not illegal. It's protected under religious freedom provisions, and in many ways, it's a major part of national identity. This could have something to do with the Haitian Revolution in 1791, which was sparked by a gathering of hundreds of enslaved Africans. They assembled in the woods for what was both a voodoo ritual and a pact for liberation. The ceremony was led by Dati Boukman, a spiritual leader and revolutionary figure, and Cecile Fatiman, a voodoo priestess whose leadership made her a symbol for the resistance. They called onto the spirits for hope and courage and freedom from slavery. Sacrifices, vows, offerings, and a collective pledge was made to resist oppression. It was a moment where spiritual belief fused with political action. Shortly after this unified ritual, enslaved populations across Haiti, known as Saint Dominique back then, rebelled. The rebellion grew into a full-blown revolution. By 1804, Haiti became the first independent Black republic and the only successful slave revolution in history. Voodoo is an Afro-Haitian religion, a fusion of West African spiritual system and Catholicism that survived colonial suppression and lives on as a lived, practiced faith. Followers worship Iwa, spirits, ancestors, and use ritual music, dance, spirit possession, prayer, and devotional rites as part of their religious lifestyle. This isn't a fringe belief. It's a spiritual worldview with doctrines, healers known as Manbo or Ungun, ritual hierarchies, and ceremonial life. In Haiti's 1987 constitution, religious freedom is guaranteed in Article 30, specifically protecting the practice of religions, including voodoo. Historical suppressions, including an older constitutional clause that once penalized voodoo, were removed, and voodoo has effectively been decriminalized and normalized as part of the religious landscape. In 2003, a presidential decree recognized voodoo as Haiti's national religion alongside Roman Catholicism, a powerful symbolic affirmation. That means in Haiti, unlike in many countries that criminalize sorcery or witchcraft, people can openly practice and identify as voodoo practitioners without fear of legal persecution. So this gives us a belief system that isn't demonized, but instead embraces a sense of community, its healing traditions, its connection to the ancestors, spirit mediumship, social identity, cultural celebrations. People attend ceremonies, offer spirits food and drink, consult priests and priestesses about illnesses, misfortunes, relationships, or community decisions. Description of spirits and their workings is religious theology rather than illegal superstition. Speaking of witchcraft and the power of community, we've got to talk about the 2022 World Cup. Argentina isn't just famous for tango, beef, and football. It's also a place where witchcraft, superstition, and spiritual ritual mix with national identity in really interesting ways. In late 2022, as Argentina chased its first FIFA World Cup victory in 36 years, something incredible happened. Hundreds, by some accounts tens of thousands, of self-described witches, brujas, organized online and in WhatsApp groups to energetically support the national team. They performed rituals, lit candles, used tarot and pendulums, and they even set altars to protect players from negative energy and help them win. They called themselves La Bruineta, a play on Bruja and La Scaloneta, Argentina's national team nickname. Within days of forming, the group exploded on social media. This isn't just fringe occultism. It shows up in two major cultural strands in Argentina: brujeria and folk spirituality. Brujeria, literally witchcraft in Spanish, is a term used around Latin America for a wide spectrum of practices, from herbal healing and protection rituals to intuitive tarot work and spiritual cleansing. Many Argentines identify as spiritual, but not strictly religious, blending Catholicism, indigenous folk belief, and New Age practices. Cabbalas, deeply rooted superstition. Aside from witches, millions of Argentines practice Cabbalas, personal good luck rituals or routines believed to affect outcomes. These often involve clothing, seating positions, eating habits, even individual match day routines. The term comes from Kabbalah, a mystical Jewish tradition, but in Argentina, it's used broadly for any superstition meant to avoid bad luck. So when Argentina lost its opening match in 2022, many people didn't just analyze tactics, they looked for spiritual help. And yo, the witches locked in and Argentina went on to win the World Cup, alright? Let's check in on Argentina's neighbors, situated in the northeast, where a large percent of the population believe in witchcraft and the supernatural. Alright, let's slide into Brazil, baby. If any country could be called a spiritual crossroads, it's gotta be Brazil. Brazil's witchcraft adjacent culture isn't one thing, it's a massive living blend of African spirituality brought by enslaved people, indigenous beliefs, Catholic imagery, spirit possession, ritual healing and protection, syncretic religions that refuse to die. And most of it survives right now on the streets, in communities, and in people's hearts. In Brazil, a lot of what outsiders label witchcraft is actually part of Afro-Brazilian religions like Candomblé and Umbanda. They are living, breathed, practiced religions with deep meaning and community. In Candomblé, people worship orixas, powerful spirits associated with nature, forces of life, and aspects of human experience like love, war, water, and fire. Worship includes drumming, dancing, trance, spirit possession, and offerings that connect practitioners directly with the unseen world. Umbanda grew in the early 20th century as a Brazilian adaptation that blends Catholic prayer, African spirit guides, indigenous cosmology, and spiritism. It's part prayer gathering, part spirit meditated support system. So when you hear about people invoking spirits with drums and chants, that's not some fringe black magic thing. That's religion, it's tradition, it's identity. Now, here's where it gets a little messy. In Brazil, the term macumba has been used in everyday language to label all Afro-Brazilian spiritual practices as black magic or witchcraft. That's not accurate religiously, but it shows how outsiders misinterpret these traditions. Even though Candomblé and Umbanda are legal religions, prejudice still exists, man. Some Brazilians see them as witchcraft or devil worship, especially when they involve possession or animal offerings, because of colonial stigma and racist attitudes. In some of these traditions, spirits like Pomba Gira are bigged up, powerful feminine spiritual figures, often associated with desire, empowerment, crossroads, sensuality, liberation. Now, because Brazil has one of the fastest rising divorce rates in the world, a noticeable number of people are turning to witchcraft and spells for relationship issues, especially in urban areas like Sao Paulo and Rio. Rituals often involve honey-covered chicken feet, red ribbon spells, frogs with closed mouths, popping symbolic items under banana trees, all aimed at binding lovers, stopping cheating, or fixing a partnership. And yeah, some of it goes sideways, and scammers have found a way to pop up and sell rituals online for big bucks. This highlights a powerful truth, right? When people feel powerless, whether they're heartbroken or spiritually lost, they sometimes turn to ritual magic as a crutch, as a solution. They want to believe that there's a fix for their problem. Now, that's not to say everyone in Brazil is holding hands and kumbayaing with witches, because despite the deep cultural roots, practitioners of Umbanda and Candomblé have reported attacks and intimidation from evangelical groups who call them devil worshippers. Mediums and spiritual leaders have been targeted or vandalized. People wearing ceremonial white garb have been assaulted on the street for their beliefs. This shows that in Brazil, belief in spirits and supernatural power can be a source of healing, but also it can be a source of conflict and fear. We see this a lot in countries that have to balance belief in organized religion and belief in their ancestors' way of life. Countries like if Brazil is the loud drumming spirit possession cousin, then Paraguay is the quiet one that absolutely believes and doesn't need to explain itself. Paraguay is one of the rare countries in the Americas where indigenous belief didn't get fully wiped out. The Guarani worldview didn't just survive colonization, it fused with Catholicism and kept it moving. And to this day, a huge percentage of the population believes in witchcraft. This is a country where politicians avoid being cursed. Football teams hire spiritual workers. People openly talk about spells, charms, and spirits. And nobody laughs at you when you say someone did work on me. Before Europeans even showed up, the Guarani people already believed in powerful spirits, magical illness, protective charms, spiritual causation for bad luck, and the idea that the invisible world constantly interferes with the visible one. That worldview never left. So instead of witchcraft being some underground shame-based thing, it just merged with Catholic saints, prayer, and folk ritual. People might go to church on Sunday and then quietly see a paje, a folk healer or witch, on Monday. In Paraguay, folk witches aren't villains. They are curanderas, pajes, spiritual workers, people believed to have real ability. They deal in herbal magic, love spells, protection charms, curse removal, healing spiritual illness, and yes, sometimes revenge work. If someone's relationship falls apart, their business collapses, or they get sick out of nowhere, people don't always say, unlucky, bad luck. No. They say someone worked against you. Let's fix it. All right, now let me introduce you to El Pombero, because this dude is legendary. Pombero is one of the most widely believed supernatural beings in Paraguay, and I'm not exaggerating. He's described as being short, ugly, hairy, trickster-coded, a half spirit, half menace. He lives in forests and rural areas and is blamed for stealing things, messing with animals, causing accidents, harassing people, seducing women, punishing disrespectful behavior. And here's the wild part. People leave offerings for this dude. Cigarettes, alcohol, food, not as a joke, but as protection. Ask locals if Pombero is real and you won't get a debate. You'll get stories. Paraguay shows us something important. Witchcraft doesn't always survive by hiding. Sometimes it survives by becoming ordinary. Not dramatic, not satanic, not hunted, just woven into daily life. And when you look at Argentina winning the World Cup with thousands of witches locking in spiritually, it makes sense when you realize the whole region already believes that energy matters, intention matters, that the unseen world is active and affects this world. Brazil, Paraguay, Argentina, different expressions, same underlying belief. Hey yo, you know who else we can add to that list? Alright, so if Paraguay was quiet belief, Bolivia is loud with it. No hiding, no whispering, no, oh, it's just folklore. Nah, in Bolivia, witchcraft isn't fringe, it's infrastructure. This is a country where ancestral magic never got fully erased, no matter how hard colonialism tried to scrub it out. And today, it lives right next to Catholic churches, government buildings, and modern cities. Same street, same people, same mindset. Over half of Bolivia's population is indigenous, and their worldview is built on one core idea. The world is alive, and if you don't respect it, it's gonna mess you up. Everything has spirit. Mountains, rivers, land, the dead, the unborn, and most important of all, Pachamama, Mother Earth. She's not symbolic, she's not metaphorical, she's active. If something in your life goes wrong, sickness, money problems, relationships are falling apart, the question isn't why me, it's who did I respect? What did I forget to give? In Bolivia, you don't just do things, you ask permission first. Before building a house, opening a business, starting a new job, taking a long journey, people make offerings to Pachamama. Food, alcohol, coca leaves, candles, and yeah, sometimes dried llama fetuses. That part always freaks outsiders out. But in Andean belief, it's protection. You feed the earth so the earth doesn't take from you later. No offering? Bad luck isn't random, it's expected. Now let's talk about La Paz. Right in the city, not hidden, not illegal, sits Mercado de las Brujas, the witches' market. And this isn't Halloween decor. You can buy love potions, luck charms, protection spells, curse removers, fertility remedies, charms to stop envy and jealousy. People come here before weddings, court cases, exams, business deals. Tourists think it's cute. Locals, well, they know better. Bolivia's witches aren't called witches. They're called yatiris, spiritual specialists, chosen by signs at birth, often struck by lightning or born during important astrological moments, which is seen as spiritual confirmation. They read coca leaves, diagnose spiritual illness, cleanse curses, perform protection rituals, communicate with ancestors. And here's the duality. Bolivia is officially Catholic. There's churches everywhere, saints everywhere. But the saints, they are treated like spirits. If a priest says something is sinful, but grandma says the mountain needs feeding, grandma wins every time. And this isn't just personal stuff. Bolivian politics has spiritual layers too. There are well-documented cases of politicians hiring yatiris, cleansing government buildings, doing rituals for protection and success. Even Evo Morales, Bolivia's former president, openly participated in indigenous ceremonies and Pachamama rituals. Imagine a world leader openly acknowledging magic as part of governance. Yo, Bolivia's dope, man. Because in a lot of places, witchcraft equals crime. Witchcraft equals the devil. Witchcraft equals madness. But in Bolivia, witchcraft equals common sense. And it shows us that witchcraft doesn't always survive by hiding. Sometimes it survives by being necessary. It feeds you, protects you, warns you, keeps the balance. And when belief becomes routine, the fear disappears. Because there's nothing scary about something everyone understands. But in Peru, belief doesn't stay quiet. It heals, it hallucinates. And sometimes it drags you face first into the spirit world, whether you ask for it or not. Peru. Now this is where witchcraft stops feeling symbolic and starts feeling chemical. Because in Peru, magic isn't just belief, it's ingestion. This is a place where the spirit world isn't just something you pray to, it's something you drink, smoke, sniff, and sit with until it introduces itself. Long before the Inca Empire, long before the Spanish pulled up with crosses and conquest, the peoples of the Andes already believed the world was alive. Not metaphorically, literally. Mountains weren't rocks, they were apus, living spirits with moods. Rivers had intention. The earth itself was Pachamama, Mother Earth, and she needed offerings, respect, reciprocity. If crops failed, if someone got sick, if the vibes were off, that wasn't random. That was spiritual imbalance. And the people tasked with fixing that imbalance were the curanderos, healers, witches if you're being spicy. A curandero isn't just someone who does spells. They diagnose illness on 3 levels: physical, emotional, spiritual. Someone comes in sick, cool. But the first question isn't what's hurting. It's who did you anger? What spirit did you disrespect? What energy followed you home? Cleansing rituals, limpias, are common. Eggs rolled over the body, herbs brushed across the skin, smoke blown deliberately, not randomly. The egg absorbs bad energy. The smoke confuses malicious spirits. The herbs, they reset the balance. Now here's where Peru gets global attention. Ayahuasca. This isn't a party drug. This isn't just a vibes, eat, pray, love and that. This is one of the most intense spiritual technologies humans have ever discovered. A brew made from jungle plants that activates DMT, a compound that sends your consciousness into places languages can't fully describe.
How do you know about ayahuasca? Granted, you're smarter and more worldly than I am, but nobody has ever said to me, tonight we have ayahuasca.
I was starting to realize that I couldn't win enough. My marriage couldn't be good enough. My kids couldn't be healthy enough, that none of that stuff was going to scratch the itch that I had. And I started a spiritual journey,
right.
And when you start to move in those spiritual circles, people bring up things. A friend of mine had come to me who had done it. I've done nothing. I've never smoked weed. I've never done cocaine. I've never taken pills. I've never done anything.
Weren't you fearful of this?
Terrified. I'm a serious researcher, and when I did my research and some of the experiences, I decided that it was something that, I wanted to try.
This is psychotropic?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. It's a psychotropic. You're not hallucinating, right? It's like both realities are 100% present. So you're in this room, you're sitting in the room, you don't lose sight. It's not like superimposed over this reality. It's totally separate. There's what's going on in your head and there's what's going on in the room.
And what is the duration of the dose?
Usually 8 hours.
Oh my.
Yeah, so.
And there's no way you can break it. It just has to run its course.
Once you drink it, you're going to see yourself in a way you've never seen yourself.
But this goes back thousands of years.
Thousands of years.
The use of
yes.
this has been...
Yes. Literally millennia. Shamans have used it. It's the vine of the gods.
Is it addictive? Is it the kind of
Not
thing?
Not at all. No, you don't want no parts of it.
Yeah.
You don't want no parts of it. Every time when you have to go back for the second day, I literally cried.
How many times did you do it?
Over a 2-year period, 14 journeys.
Really?
One of the experiences was the individual, most hellish psychological experience of my life.
People report seeing ancestors, talking to spirits, meeting entities that they can't explain or describe, reliving trauma, feeling the earth breathe. So in Peru, witchcraft isn't criminal. It's not hunted. It's not whispered about like a shameful secret. It's respected. Feared sometimes, yeah, of course, but it's understood. And when belief becomes routine, fear disappears. Now when we head north from Peru, the magic changes tone. Because the next place, the spirits don't just heal, they judge, they demand, and sometimes they wear bones. Mexico. Now, here's a country that doesn't flinch at death, okay? It doesn't pretend it isn't coming. It doesn't hide it behind hospital curtains and euphemisms. In Mexico, death has a name, a face, an altar, and for millions of people, a relationship. Before Spain, before Catholicism, before the word witchcraft ever landed here, death was already holy. The Aztecs didn't see death as the opposite of life. It was part of the cycle. You didn't go to heaven or hell based on morality. You went based on how you died. The underworld wasn't punishment, it was a journey. And death gods ruled not with cruelty, but inevitability. Catholicism went, hey, pray to these saints. Mexico went, all right, cool, but we already know death personally. And over time, a figure emerged from the shadows, not sanctioned by the church, not officially holy, but deeply, deeply loved. Santa Muerte, holy death. A skeletal woman, often robed, often holding a scythe, a globe, scales, an hourglass. Homegirl doesn't judge your past. She doesn't ask if you're good. She doesn't care if the church approve. She just puts in that work. And she rocks with everybody. Yes, criminals pray to her. Cartels, gang members, people living violent lives, but also single mothers, LGBTQ plus communities, migrants crossing borders, prisoners, sex workers, people failed by institutions. Santa Muerte protects the one society already wrote off, because death doesn't discriminate, and neither does she. Devotion isn't casual. People go in, man. They build altars in homes, shops, streets. They offer candles, cigarettes, alcohol, apples, flowers, money, red for love, black for protection, white for peace, gold for success. And here's the part that, low-key scares some people. Devotees don't just pray, they make promises. If you protect my son, I'll keep your altar lit. If you get me through this, I won't forget you. This isn't symbolic faith. This is transactional spirituality. So, is it witchcraft or religion? Oh, it depends on who you ask. The Catholic Church goes Santa Muerte is blasphemy. Authorities have destroyed altars. Priests warn people that she's demonic. But belief doesn't care about approval. Millions of people openly practice devotion, and many more do it quietly. Oh yeah, and beyond Santa Muerte, man, there's folk magic everywhere. Evil eye protection, love spells sold in markets, curanderas consulted alongside doctors. People might not call themselves witches, but they believe energy can follow you, stick to you, mess with your life. And when that belief is this widespread, it stops being scary. It becomes survival. Death isn't the end, it's an ally. That's the difference in Mexico. Death isn't the villain. Death is the companion walking beside you. And when life is dangerous, unstable, unfair, you don't pray to a distant heaven. You pray to the one force you know will show up. So far, we've seen plants that teach, spirits that heal, witches that protect nations, and death that guards the living. But what happens when witchcraft doesn't protect? What happens when it hunts? Because in the next place, magic isn't just feared, it's blamed for sickness, for bad luck, for death itself, and sometimes the punishment is worse than the spell. Next stop. Ghana is one of those places where magic isn't just part of the past, it's living, breathing, dangerous. And here's the twist. Sometimes the magic turns against the innocent. In Ghana, like much of West Africa, spiritual life isn't separate from reality. People see witches not as fairy tales or myths, but as real threats. Misfortune, sickness, drought, family problems. The first question isn't what happened, it's who did this to you? Belief in witchcraft is woven into daily life. Priests, herbalists, and local elders are consulted first before doctors or the police, and it's not always adults being blamed. In some regions, children, mostly girls, are accused of witchcraft. Why? Because families in crisis, man, they look for a cause. Communities under stress point fingers at the vulnerable. Poverty, illness, death. Anything unexplained can trigger a witch accusation. These kids aren't just shouted at, man. They're ostracized, abused, or even expelled from their homes. And it's not rare. NGOs report hundreds of witch children in Ghana every year, many living in prayer camps run by pastors claiming to cast out evil spirits. These camps promise protection and deliverance from witchcraft, but in practice, the children are locked up, starved, beaten, made to do grueling cleansing rituals, all in the name of saving their souls. Thankfully, awareness is growing, man. It's growing. It's getting better. NGOs like Ghanaian Witch Camps Advocacy work to rescue children. Some local leaders are educating communities to separate misfortune from magic. Government laws exist, but enforcement is tricky. Belief runs deeper than paper. But yo, Ghana isn't all horror stories. Herbalists heal. Priests bless crops and protect families. Spiritual consultations remain a vital part of the community life. The key is intent and consequence. When witchcraft is practiced as healing or protection, it's accepted, even revered. When it's accusation and punishment, it becomes a nightmare. Alright, next up, we're going to cross the continent to the Democratic Republic of Congo, a place where witchcraft accusations spiral into mass hysteria and communities face real tragic consequences. Ghana showed us the dangerous edge of belief. DRC takes that tension and turns it up to 11. Here, witchcraft accusations aren't rare. They rip families apart, they spark violence, and sometimes they got tragic ends. In DRC, witchcraft isn't fringe, it's embedded in the daily way of thinking. If crops fail, a kid gets sick, or someone dies suddenly, communities look for someone to blame. Elders, pastors, and spiritual diviners weigh in. Their verdict can make or break lives. And the stakes? Very real, very deadly. Just like in Ghana, the most vulnerable are often children. Estimates suggest tens of thousands of children have been accused of being witches. Accusations often happen in the chaotic mix of poverty, disease, and social stress. Families may abandon their own kids, bro, sending them to witch camps run by pastors or self-proclaimed spiritual leaders. Unlike Ghana though, the DRC often sees violent community enforcement. Kids are beaten, shunned, or forced to perform dangerous rituals. Some are left homeless, some never return home. Here's where it gets wild, man. Pentecostal and charismatic churches wield massive influence. Pastors claim to identify witches with miraculous visions, water tests, or spirit revelations. If a child is mocked, the community may band together to punish him. It's mob mentality meets mysticism. Accusations spread like wildfire. Fear feeds fear. What started as a small claim can explode into a full-blown witch hunt. DRC shows us the dark side of witch belief. Accusations reinforce power hierarchies. Families can scapegoat children to hide their own failures. Communities enforce conformity through fear of spiritual retaliation. Magic isn't just magic, it's lawless authority in disguise. There is some light in the darkness. Groups like Save Africa's Children work tirelessly to rescue, rehabilitate, and reintegrate children accused of witchcraft. Awareness campaigns teach families to separate misfortune from magic. Slowly, some communities are beginning to question the practice. But the belief runs deep, and fear is older than the law. We've seen this kind of thing before, but we've also seen the light at the end of the tunnel, and we know what it looks like when a country heals. Just like Alright, let's talk about Belgium, or more accurately, the land that would become Belgium. Back in the 16th and 17th centuries, when witch panic was absolutely real and absolutely brutal, this region wasn't a fringe corner of the world. It was smack in the middle of Europe's bloodiest witch hunting zones. In fact, historians estimate that in what was then the southern Netherlands, roughly today's Belgium and Luxembourg, at least 1,150 to 1,250 people were executed as witches between about 1450 and 1685. That's huge. And just like everywhere else in Europe, fear made ordinary people. Fear turned ordinary people into accusations and then into victims. The city of Ghent is one of the places where this history hits closest to home. Between the 14th and 18th century, at least 60 people were accused of witchcraft in Ghent alone, mostly women, but also, some men and even a boy. Rumor, gossip, or just not fitting the social mold was enough to lead to torture and execution. In one insane story, a beggar named Catherine Tancred picked up a piece of bread dropped by a child and mumbled, "May the devil take you." Shortly after, the kid got sick and Catherine was accused of witchcraft, convicted, and burnt at the stake in 1603. One of the most notorious witch trials in Belgian history happened in the town of Spa in 1616, and it shows how quickly fear can take over logic. A mysterious plague was killing both people and livestock. Rather than understanding germs or the environment, authorities decided the problem was witchcraft, and they actively encouraged locals to turn in anybody they suspected of being a witch. They weren't picky about the evidence. Who cares about the evidence? That's just semantics. One woman was accused because she once felt cold. Another because a man claimed his horse got sick after passing her. Before you know it, 14 women were convicted, 10 taken out, and others possibly died in prison or under torture. Fast forward to today, and Belgium is actually doing something a lot of countries still struggle with. Cities like Ghent and Leer are officially recognizing and rehabilitating people executed for witchcraft hundreds of years ago. Plaques are going up, educational programs are being introduced, and authorities are saying straight up that these prosecutions were driven by fear, prejudice, and hysteria, not evidence. Ghent city leaders have placed memorials and included discussions of witch hunts in school curriculums as a way to talk about misinformation, prejudice, and the dangers of mass panic. As a wise Brer once said, those who don't learn from the past are doomed to repeat it. And Belgium's out here owning their past and using education to create a better future. And if there's a country that knows a thing or two about that, it's... Between the 15th and 18th century, what's now Germany was fragmented into hundreds of small principalities, free cities, and all that. That political patchwork, it was the perfect breeding ground for fear, suspicion, and accusations. The Reformation and Counter-Reformation pitted Protestants against Catholics, and accusations of witchcraft were sometimes a tool in that fight. Fear and superstition was widespread. Crop failures, plagues, and sudden deaths were explained away as the work of witches. Germany saw some of the largest and deadliest witch hunts in history. Tens of thousands accused, upwards of 25,000 to 30,000 executed, mostly women. Certain regions like Würzburg and Bamberg had mass trials where hundreds were executed in a single wave. Clergy, local courts, and secular authorities often worked hand in hand, using torture to extract confessions. The Bamberg witch trials from 1626 to 1631 were one of the most infamous episodes. Over 600 people were executed in just a few years. Accusations often targeted the socially vulnerable, widows, beggars, outspoken women, midwives. Confessions were coerced under torture, fueling a cycle of accusation and death. When you look at Germany's history, it makes sense, because German folklores were rich with witches, devils, and magical beings. Local tales weren't just entertainment, they informed real fears. Astrology, herbalism, and folk magic existed, sometimes tolerated, sometimes demonized. Witchcraft accusations were often intertwined with everyday power struggles, inheritance disputes, rivalries, or local politics. Germany's decentralized political system allowed for localized hysteria to spiral out of control. Many historians argue that economic stress, religious conflict, and fear of the unknown combined to create one of the deadliest environments for witches in history. Unlike in parts of Latin America or the Caribbean, there was little protective cultural framework. Once accused, survival was almost impossible. Today, towns like Bamberg, Würzburg, and Trier still remember the trials through museums and memorials. Modern Germany has embraced historical reflection. Witch hunts are seen as cautionary tales about fear, scapegoating, and abuse of power. Folklore lives on, but the criminalization of witchcraft is long gone. Germany treats it as history, not law. Germany's neighbor, Austria, doesn't have the same widespread witch hunt history that Germany or England does. But the episodes it does have are some of the strangest and most tragic in European witch lore.
Blossom of snow, may you bloom and grow, bloom and grow forever. Edelweiss, Edelweiss, bless my homeland forever.
The Zauberjackal witch trials, sometimes known as the Magician Jackal's process, were a series of trials and executions in Salzburg from about 1675 to 1690. These are remembered as some of the most intense witch persecutions in Austria's history. Here's what makes it so unusual. Unlike most European witch hunts, which overwhelmingly targeted women, this Austrian frenzy largely targeted men, boys, and teenagers. Of the roughly 139 people executed, about 113 were male, including 39 children aged 10 to 14. This stands in stark contrast to the typical witch hunt narrative where older women, midwives, or healers were accused. In Salzburg, it was homeless boys, vagabonds, and young men disproportionately accused and executed. It all began with Barbara Collerin, a woman accused of theft and sorcery in 1675. Under torture, she implicated her son, Paul Jacob Koller, claiming he'd made a pact with the devil and led others in teaching black magic. From that point, the Zauberjackal, the wizard jackal, became the central figure of fear, even though he was never actually captured. Rumors about Jackal grew wilder over time. He was said to be able to turn invisible, control animals like mice and rats, ruin harvests, lead gangs of poor children into sorcery. Authorities, terrified of his influence, began arresting and torturing anyone suspected of being connected to him, even though he himself remained at large. Time and time again, we see this thing where someone's accused of witchcraft, and when they confess, it's super fantastical, super evil, it's working with dark forces. But in some cultures, witchcraft isn't loud, it's not big, it's more of a whisper. Alright, next stop on this global witchcraft tour, Belarus. Now, this is a land where old magic looks like water, whispers, forests, herbs, and voices carried in the wind. In Belarusian villages, generations of people once carried a kind of folk magic that wasn't about curses or hexing your neighbor. It was about healing and protection. They weren't called witches in the Halloween sense. They were called whisper healers. Women, and sometimes men, whose gift was in the voice, a barely audible murmur that would cure ailments and chase away spiritual harm. Here's how it worked. If someone was sick or couldn't sleep or they felt spiritually off, a whisper healer would take a bowl of water, gently breathe or whisper carefully crafted words over it, and that water, when drunk or splashed, was believed to heal. Every illness had a special whispered text, sometimes rhymed, always precise. People whispered over water, bread, salt, ash, herbs, and then gave it to the sick person to drink or wash with. This was spiritual medicine woven with Christian saints and pagan roots. And healers weren't random people. You learned this from your elders, usually very young, like, between 7 and 12, and only a few were ever chosen. That's not superstition, that's living tradition. Belarusian magic doesn't live in a vacuum. It's a blend of old Slavic spirit beliefs and Orthodox Christianity. When Christianity spread, it didn't erase the folk rituals, it absorbed it. So you end up with magic that invokes Christian saints, pagan nature spirits, sacred centers of power, all wrapped into one ritual. This mix shows up in things like Kopala Night, a midsummer festival filled with fire, water, herbs, and protection rituals against malevolent forces. One legend says that on Kopala Night, jumping over fire or tossing wreaths into rivers isn't just for fun. It's believed to cleanse the spirit, protect you from harm, and invite fertility and good luck. Belarusian folklore is loaded with spirits that aren't exactly witches, but are just as eerie and belief-shaping. We got the Rusalki, water nymphs who could lure men into watery doom. Leshy, mischievous forest guardians who protect nature and confuse travelers. Domovic, household spirits believed to protect families, but only if treated with respect. In East Slavic folk tradition, including Belarus, there are spoken enchantments called zagovori. They are incantations spoken with intention, designed to heal an injury, protect a home, bind an enemy, bless livestock, ward off evil. They aren't random chants. They were treated almost like verbal spells where the right words had real force, real power, and sometimes they even invoked saints, wind, stars, the dawn, sacred sites, blending Christianity and belief into one. Think of them like Slavic folk magic incantations, whisper-based, oral, passed down from person to person over generation. In Belarus, the magic lives in the whisper. Say it right and the world bends. Say it wrong and something follows you home. But travel west to a land where words didn't just heal or protect, they cursed families for generations. In rural Ireland, especially up through the 19th and early 20th century, curses were believed to be real forces, not metaphors. People believed a spoken curse could ruin your crops, twist your luck, kill your animals, or follow your family for generations. And the wild part, you didn't need to be a witch. If the wrong person cursed you, someone believed to be spiritually charged, angry, or wronged, that was enough. No take-backs, no apologies. Once it was put out there, it was done. That's why people in old Ireland were careful with their words. You didn't mock the poor, you didn't insult the elderly, and you never disrespected someone people whispered about. Because if they ever hit you with a, "May you never see a good day again," or "May your road rise against you," that wasn't poetic, that was a spiritual threat. Now, Ireland wasn't just curses and doom. There were fairy doctors, folk healers believed to have knowledge of herbs, charms, spoken prayers, fairy lore. They treated unexplained illness, sudden bad luck, fairy strokes, what we now call strokes or seizures, children believed to be changelings. Now, obviously, the church wasn't happy with this, okay? They condemned all of it. But on the ground, people still carried charms, spoke blessings over livestock, whispered prayers, half Christian, half ancient. And here's the thing, Ireland feared the curse, respected it, worked around it. But crossed the water into Scotland, they didn't just believe in witchcraft, they executed people for it. Because in Scotland, spoken magic didn't just ruin your luck, it could get you tortured, tried, and burned at the stake. Now, if Ireland feared the curse, Scotland went to war with it. Scotland didn't just believe in witchcraft, it became obsessed with it. From the late 1500s into the 1700s, Scotland had one of the highest execution rates for witches in Europe. Not population adjusted, not for the time, just straight up. They were taking out a lot of people. And a huge part of that comes down to one man, King James VI of Scotland, later James I of England. This dude was convinced witches were real, not metaphorically, not symbolically, real, organized, working with the devil. In 1590, when a violent storm nearly sank the ship carrying his new bride, James decided witches were responsible. This led to the North Berwick witch trials, one of the most infamous cases in Scottish history. Dozens of people were accused of meeting with the devil, kissing his backside, raising storms to kill the king, performing group rituals in graveyards. People were tortured until they confessed, and once someone confessed, they were forced to name others. It spread like a virus. Unlike some parts of Europe, Scottish courts relied heavily on confession under torture, which included sleep deprivation, binding people into painful positions, crushing thumbs with iron devices, psychological pressure until people broke. And once you confessed, the details didn't matter. If you said, yeah, the devil appeared as a black dog, or a man with cloven feet, or a shadow that whispered your name, that was taken as confirmation, not madness. The people that got accused, same pattern, okay, we've seen it before. Women, the elderly, the poor, healers, midwives, outspoken people, anyone already disliked. But Scotland also accused men more often than many countries, especially ministers, scholars, and people who challenged authority. This wasn't about magic. It was about control. Scotland went super hard, and that's because at the time it was deeply Protestant, obsessed with moral purity, terrified of the devil's influence, politically unstable. So witchcraft became the explanation for everything. Failed harvests, storms, illness, sexual deviance, women stepping out of line. Witchcraft was the monster that let society point at someone and say, hey, it's your fault. Centuries later, Scotland has started reckoning with its history. In 2022, the Scottish government issued a formal apology to the victims of the witch trials.
As First Minister, on behalf of the Scottish Government, I am choosing to acknowledge that egregious historic injustice and extend a formal posthumous apology to all those accused, convicted, vilified or executed under the Witchcraft Act 1563.
Now, Iceland is fascinating because this is one of the few places in Europe where belief in magic didn't automatically equal panic. They believed deeply, but they didn't lose their minds like Scotland did. In Icelandic tradition, magic was called Gauder. And Gauder wasn't about demons jumping out of shadows. It was about spoken chants, runic symbols, intent and knowledge, understanding the hidden rules of the world. Sounds familiar? Yeah. Belarus vibes, Ireland vibes, Zagovori energy. Words had power, symbols had power, and the person using them wasn't evil by default. They were just skilled. Iceland didn't just pass the magic down orally, they wrote it down. We're talking about real text like the Gauder book, the Sorcerer's Creed, books filled with spells, runes, and sigils designed for protection, luck, love, finding thieves, cursing enemies. These weren't fringe texts. They circulated among scholars, farmers, even clergy. Magic wasn't underground. It wasn't a secret. It was documented. And you had Icelandic magical staves. These are symbols designed to do something. Protect sailors at sea, bring victory, ward off fear, prevent starvation, keep spirits away. One of the most famous is the Vegvisir, often called the Viking Campus. Not a literal map, a spiritual one. The belief was if you carried it, you would never lose your way, even in storms. Now, don't get it twisted, Iceland did have witch trials, but here's the flip side. Most of the people executed for witchcraft in Iceland were men. Why? Because magic was seen as a technical skill rune knowledge, book learning, and guess who had access to the books? Men. So when witchcraft became criminalized under Danish rule in the 1600s, it was literate men, not midwives, who got targeted. Total executions? Around 20 people. That's it. Now, of course, RIP to the 20 and, it sucks, but compared to everywhere else we've seen, compared to Scotland's thousands, 20 is low-key nothing. Iceland proves something important. You can believe in magic without needing to burn someone over it. Because when magic is understood as a craft, a system, a survival tool, fear doesn't spiral. People don't panic. They respect it. So, Iceland shows us what happens when magic is documented and normalized. Botswana, however, shows us what happens when belief is alive, social, and deeply embedded in daily life. But fear still walks right alongside it. Botswana is often held up as one of Africa's most stable countries. Politically solid, growing economy, strong institutions, but underneath that calm surface, witchcraft belief is very real and very feared. This is one of those places where witchcraft isn't a costume, it's not vibes, it's an explanation for things that shouldn't happen. In many Tswana communities, witchcraft, often referred to broadly as boloi, is believed to cause sudden illnesses, unexplained death, infertility, business failure, mental breakdowns, family misfortune. And here's the key thing. Witches aren't strangers. They're believed to be neighbors, relatives, co-workers, people close enough to envy you. Witchcraft in Botswana is intimate. It comes from inside the community, and that's what makes it terrifying. A recurring theme in Botswana belief is envy. If you rise too fast, if you succeed quietly, if you don't share, people might say, hey, they're gonna get you. Success without explanation becomes suspicious. Misfortune without cause becomes intentional. So witchcraft becomes a way to talk about inequality, resentment, social imbalance. Magic fills the gap where people can't openly confront each other. Because belief is super strong, protection is normal. People consult Dingaka, traditional healers, diviners who diagnose spiritual causes, herbalists who counter witchcraft. Protective measures include charms hidden in clothing, medicines buried near homes, rituals to close the body spiritually. This is everyday life for a lot of people in Botswana, and this is where it gets tense. Botswana officially criminalizes witchcraft accusations, not witchcraft itself. So, you can believe in witches, you can seek protection, you can consult healers, but accusing someone publicly of being a witch, that can get you in legal trouble. Which makes sense because accusations have historically led to violence, banishment, elderly women being attacked, children being harmed. The law is trying to stop the bloodshed, but belief doesn't disappear just because it's illegal to say it out loud. So witchcraft belief lives in whispers, in coded language, in people looking at you sideways. Botswana shows us a pattern we've seen before. When witchcraft is believed to be invisible, internal, motivated by jealousy, fear becomes permanent. There's no symbol, no ritual that ends it, no confession that resolves it, just permanent suspicion. Botswana shows us witchcraft as something feared because it's hidden, unnamed, and socially explosive. But what happens when the unseen world isn't whispered about? What happens when spirits are organized, named, petitioned, and welcomed? Taiwanese folk religion is a layered mix of Taoism, Buddhism, Confucian ethics, local spirit worship, ancestor veneration. Most people don't even label themselves as religious. They just burn incense, ask gods for advice, consult spirit mediums, thank ancestors for protection. It's not about belief versus disbelief. It's about maintenance. You don't worship the gods, you work with them. Now, this is where outsiders start screaming, witchcraft! Taiwan has spirit mediums called jitong. These are individuals who allow gods or spirits to possess them, speak through them, and act through their bodies. During rituals, you see Jitong enter trance-like states, carving their skin, walking on blades, smashing their backs with spiked weapons, bleeding without pain. People consult these mediums for illness, bad luck, missing persons, business decisions, protection from spirits. This isn't underground. This happens in open temples, bro, in the daylight with crowds watching. In Taiwan, ghosts aren't automatically evil. They're often just lonely, forgotten, angry, unfinished. Which brings us to Ghost Month. Every year during the 7th lunar month, Taiwan observes Ghost Month. The belief? The gates of the spirit world open. Hungry ghosts roam freely. So what do people do? They leave food offerings. They burn incense and paper money. They avoid risky behavior. They delay major life decisions. Not out of terror, but out of respect. Feed the ghosts, acknowledge them, and then they won't mess with you. Ignore them? See, that's when the problems start. This is spiritual conflict resolution. Taiwanese spiritual life includes talismans, divination blocks, fortune sticks, energy cleansing, ritual protection. But nobody's calling themselves a witch, because when everyone participates, it stops being witchcraft. It becomes culture. Taiwan shows us a world where spirits are named, rituals are public, possession is controlled, and the unseen is negotiated with, not feared. But what happens when belief is just as strong and the spirits are just as real, but the society turns that belief into suspicion? When magic isn't organized in temples but whispered in villages, when accusations don't end in offerings but in violence. To understand that side of the story, we need to go somewhere belief still carries deadly consequences. Let's talk about in rural Bangladesh, belief in witchcraft, locally called jadoo, is still very real. And when something goes wrong, people don't always look at systems, they look at someone. Jadoo is believed to cause illness, infertility, crop failure, sudden death, mental breakdowns, family misfortunes. When doctors can't explain it, when money runs out, when grief hits too hard, people start asking, who did this to us? And that's when the accusations begin. And it's almost always women, elderly women, widows, poor women, women without male protection, women who are different, women who speak up. Sound familiar? Yeah, man, same pattern we saw in Europe, same pattern we saw in Africa, same pattern we saw in Salem. Different country, same fear. In Bangladesh, accusations of witchcraft have led to public beatings, forced confessions, banishment, torture. Villages have shaved women's heads, paraded them publicly, burned homes, forced families to flee. And here's the sickest part. Often the violence isn't spontaneous. It's community approved. Neighbors, relatives, local leaders, all of them agreeing this person is the problem. Bangladesh technically has laws against violence, but witchcraft accusations live in that weird gray area, in that space where superstition, poverty, lack of healthcare, patriarchy, and social control overlap. The police sometimes arrive too late. Sometimes they don't intervene at all. And sometimes they quietly agree with the accusation, because belief is stronger than law. And yo, let's be clear, man. We're not blaming religion entirely, okay? Because there's a distinction. This isn't Islamic doctrine. This isn't religious law. This is folk belief weaponized. Salem wasn't Christianity. European witch hunts weren't theology. African witch camps aren't traditional religion. All of it, man, is just fear. It's fear systems. When people don't have answers, they invent enemies. We got NGOs and activists in Bangladesh working to educate communities, protect accused women, intervene during witch hunts, reframe illnesses and misfortune as medical or social issues. But change is slow because belief isn't logical, it's emotional. Bangladesh shows us what happens when belief stays strong, institutions stay weak, and fear fills that gap. But now let's move to a place where witchcraft belief is just as intense, just as widespread, yet instead of mobs and whispers, the response becomes formal, regulated, codified, written into law, because in Zambia, witchcraft isn't just feared, it's officially illegal and officially believed by the state. So Zambia sits in this very strange space where belief in witchcraft is widespread. Accusations are taken seriously, and the state itself steps in, not to protect witches, but to police them. Zambia still operates under the Witchcraft Act, a law inherited from British colonial rule. And this law does two contradictory things at the same time. It goes, you can't accuse someone of being a witch, but it also goes, practicing witchcraft is illegal. Okay, now pause. How do you prove witchcraft without believing witchcraft exists? Exactly. The law never clearly defines what witchcraft is, but it still punishes people for it. That's how belief sneaks into legislation. In many Zambian communities, especially rural ones, witchcraft is believed to cause sudden illness, unexplained death, infertility, business failure, mental distress, family breakdowns, and when something goes wrong, suspicion spreads fast. People talk, rumors grow, names start circulating. In some cases, courts have relied on confessions under pressure, testimony from traditional healers, claims of supernatural attacks, dreams and visions. There have even been documented cases where alleged witch doctors were consulted to identify the witches. So even inside a modern legal system, superstition still gets a seat at the table. What Zambia shows us is this: you don't need chaos for witch hunts to happen. All you need is belief, fear, and authority that doesn't challenge either. When the law itself assumes witchcraft is possible, it validates suspicion. And once suspicion is validated, accusations feel justified. Now, Zambia isn't alone on this legal tightrope, because just south of here, there's another country where witchcraft is deeply believed, socially powerful, and legally recognized in a very specific way. In Zimbabwe, the state doesn't just punish witches, it actually regulates witch finders. Yeah, the people who identify witches, they've got legal framework. Let's talk about it. So, in Zimbabwe, belief in witchcraft isn't fringe, it's mainstream. Witchcraft is commonly believed to cause sudden death, unexplained illness, infertility, mental distress, family misfortune, economic collapse. If something goes left and there's no obvious explanation, people don't say, hey, that's random, it be like that sometimes. They say, there's gotta be witchcraft involved. Zimbabwe, just like Zambia, still operates under the Witchcraft Suppression Act, another colonial era law left behind by the British. Meaning you can't legally accuse someone of being a witch, but the law assumes witchcraft belief exists, and it criminalizes actions around witchcraft rather than the belief itself. So the belief stays, the fear stays, the accusation just gets rerouted. And here's why Zimbabwe really stands out. Zimbabwe has legally recognized witch finders, often called nangas or traditional healers. These people are believed to identify witches, cleanse cursed homes, remove spells, protect communities, neutralize spiritual threats. And yes, some of them are officially registered with traditional healer associations. Let that sink in. The state doesn't say witchcraft is real. It goes, let's control who's allowed to deal with it. The problem with identifying witches is once a witch finder points a finger, that's it. Social death. Even if no law is broken, families get torn apart, people are expelled from villages, homes get burned, accused individuals flee for their lives. And the most accused, you already know, elderly women, widows, people with land, people without protection, people who do not conform. Witch finding becomes a way to settle grudges, grab property, enforce social norms, punish difference. So far, we've seen Africa criminalizing witchcraft, regulating witch finders, building laws around belief. But let's flip the map back to Europe for a second. Because while Africa is often painted as superstitious, Europe got its own unfinished business. In Bulgaria, witchcraft didn't vanish with the Middle Ages. It went underground, put on makeup, changed its name. And today, witches don't get burned there. They get booked, advertised, and paid. Let's talk about it. Aye, Bulgaria. If you think Europe's witchcraft is all dusty manuscripts and Halloween costumes, think again, homie, because here magic walks with you. It's in the forests, it's in the villages, it's in the old women sweeping thresholds with herbs and whispered words. Bulgaria's witches, locals call them vraki or babi. Wise women, healers, keepers of the unseen. They're not pointy-hatted cartoon characters. They heal with herbs and potions, protect homes with charms and amulets. They ward off evil spirits from livestock and children. They read signs in birds, wind, and dreams. Bulgaria is crawling with spirits and unseen forces. Samodivi, ethereal forest maidens, beautiful but deadly if disrespected. Zmei, dragon-like guardians, sometimes troublemakers. Domovoi, household spirits, protectors of the earth. People don't just tell stories about them, they live alongside them. You don't leave your home unblessed, and you definitely don't disrespect the forest. Every spring, Bulgarians celebrate Kukeri, where costumed locals perform rituals to chase away evil spirits and bless the community. Think masks, bells, dances, and energy so thick you can almost see it. It's magic as performance, magic as protection, magic as everyday life. Bulgaria shows us something wild. In some parts of Europe, witchcraft didn't disappear, it just went under the radar, quietly shaping life, culture, and survival. Today, being a witch looks way different from old school persecution or folk superstition. We got nature-based spirituality. Many witches draw inspiration from the earth, seasons, plants, and ecology, connecting inner life with the natural world. We got ritual and intention. Ritual isn't dogma, it's practice, lighting candles, casting circles, divination, seasonal celebrations, energy work, shadow work, light work, moon rituals. It's personal empowerment and self-discovery. Modern witchcraft is often less about magic as force and more about magic as meaning. Some people identify with specific paths. We're talking Wicca, eclectic witchcraft, sea witchcraft, ancestral witches. Most see their craft as part religion, part psychology, part art. And just like any cultural movement, there is debate and diversity about what a witch actually is. Some folks see it as a spiritual identity, others as a personal practice, and some even recognize it as a form of empowerment beyond gender or religion. Hey, if you've made it this far, I appreciate you. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. Please drop a comment. Let me know where you're watching from and what the attitudes towards witchcraft are in your neck of the woods. Please subscribe, please like, and until next time, you take care of yourself, fam, because I love you.